Hi, I'm Ben Turner, and today I'm going to show you how to create HDR images to deal with high contrast scenes like the one behind me today. HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, and in this instance, the dynamic range part of the name refers to the range of light levels that's recorded in the image, from the darkest shadows to the brightest highlights. Now, with a standard shot of a high contrast landscape, there comes a point when the dark shadows are so dark they actually become pure black and don't contain any detail at all. The same goes for the highlights too, but instead of turning black, they turn pure white, and this is known as burnout. This effect is also known as clipping and can be a problem when crucial image details fall outside the dynamic range of your camera. What you often find with landscapes is you'll take a snap and the entire foreground is lost in the shadows because the camera is exposed for the bright sky. Both the sky and the foreground parts cannot be exposed correctly at the same time without some clipping, as the dynamic range is not high enough. So the end result just looks a bit rubbish. HDR images actually contain a much wider range of tones, so extreme shadow and highlight detail is retained. HDR images are actually created by combining several images taken using different exposures, which are much lighter and darker than the original shot. The darker shots contain extra highlight detail, and the lighter shots, well, they contain extra shadow detail. Using software, we can merge the information to create one shot that contains all the detail in a high contrast scene. When processed, the results look very different to a straight shot, but the contrast is much improved. It's ideal for any high contrast scene, such as the sunny conditions like we have here today. Okay, so I found a nice shot here. We've got some beautiful silver birches in the background and these foxgloves in the foreground. That'll make a nice shot. Okay, the first job is to set up a tripod. I've just done that here, and it's essential we use one, as all of the shots in the sequence have to line up perfectly, otherwise we won't get a good result. Hand holding just isn't going to get us anywhere. This also means everything in the scene needs to be static too, so don't try this on a windy day. We've got a tiny amount of breeze coming in here, but we're just going to time our shots when the wind drops, so it'll be fine. So let's just get the camera out. Okay, let's just set up the camera. I'm going to use aperture priority mode for this one, so I'm just going to turn the mode dial around to AV there. A few other settings to check as well. I'm just going to change the aperture, just going to increase that to about the middle aperture for about f11. That should give us a decent depth of field and decent quality. Although with this particular shot, I think a wide aperture might work as well, so I'm just going to do both while we've got it set up in a tripod. Okay, so I'm going to check the ISO. I want that at the lowest setting, which is 100. And I'm also just going to change the white balance and just make sure that that is on sunny. We have to make sure that the white balance is consistent throughout the shots as well. Let's just put this over to manual focus. That's going to manual focus on the closest foxglove. Right, now comes the really clever bit. I'm going to get the camera to automatically take 3 shots for me using different exposures. One straight shot using the metering the camera deems appropriate, and then 2 stops brighter, and another shot 2 stops darker. The camera will do all of this by changing the shutter speed. The technique is known as bracketing, or more specifically in this case, auto exposure bracketing. So let's just set that up. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the menu, come across to AEB, or auto exposure bracket, hit set to accept that. Now to increase the bracketing to a maximum of 2 stops. The little bars there, that indicates how much brighter or darker the bracketed shots will be. So I'm just going to hit set again. And you can see that the auto exposure bracketing has been activated by looking at the top plate here. Finally, I'm going to change the drive mode to self timer so we don't have to touch the camera and risk accidentally moving the camera between the shots. So I'm just going to hit the drive button there and move that over to self timer, 2 seconds. Okay, and let's focus up and take the shots. And that's our 3 shots. It's as easy as that. Now, if your camera doesn't offer a suitable auto exposure bracketing mode, then just use exposure compensation instead. Just make sure you take a straight shot, using the exposure compensation at 0, and then take one at +2 and one at -2. Just be ever so careful not to knock the camera between shots. If the contrast is really high in your scene, then you can take more shots to capture an even greater dynamic range. For this, use the manual exposure mode, that's the M on the dial, and choose an aperture, and then use a range of shutter speeds from several seconds to, say, 1/1000th of a second, or whatever seems most suitable for your scene. There's no real limit to the number of shots you can combine, just be really careful not to move the camera between shots. Even with a sturdy tripod like this, it's easy to knock the camera out of alignment. Okay, so that's the main images taken, and I'm going to take a few more shots here. It's a lovely day, and I'm going to head back home to bring the shots together in a great bit of software called Photomatics. It's specifically designed for HDR images. So, see you later. Oh, that's been a long day. Taken a couple of gigs worth of pictures, so hopefully I have something good in there. I'm just going to download the shots now onto the computer and find 3 pictures that I like the look of. Obviously 3 pictures from the same sequence. And I'm going to do a basic RAW conversion on them because I shot RAW. I'm going to make sure I use the same RAW settings for each shot, so there's no confusion there. And I'm going to bring them into Photomatics for the final merge. So I'll see you in a minute. Okay, so here we are in Photomatics Pro. And I've opened up the first image from the sequence of shots that I like the look of, and as you can see straight away there's a lot of burnout on the actual foxgloves. Now this is actually using the exposure settings that the camera recommended, so this won't do at all. So what we're going to do first is generate our HDR image from our 3 start images. The one that's like this one, this is standard exposure, then there's one 2 stops overexposed and then 2 stops underexposed. So I'm going to go to generate HDR image, click on browse, and then go to the folder I've got my 3 shots in and click open, and then just click OK. Now these are the options we need to use to actually merge all the shots together. The first one here, this is about aligning the source images. If you haven't used a tripod, it will attempt to kind of automatically position them all together. We don't need that one as we use a tripod. This one here, about reducing ghosting artifacts. That's if you've got some moving subjects in your frame, but we don't, because we were lucky enough to have quite a still day. And then so finally, I'm just going to use this recommended setting here for the tone curve, and just click OK. And then this will take a few seconds just to merge all of those shots together into one HDR file. Well, here we go. This is our HDR image, and as you can see it looks a lot worse than the actual original. Now the reason for this is that a standard monitor cannot display all of the tones in our final HDR image. There's tones that are too dark and too bright to actually display on the screen, so it all looks a bit funny. But if you look at the preview just over here, you can see as I pan around, if I go into the burnout over here, you can see that it actually fades down. So all of that detail is in the shots, we just need to extract it. And to do that, we need to use tone mapping. So I'm just going to close this down and just click on the tone mapping box here. Okay, so these are the main tone mapping settings. And as you can see, we've got 2 main options. We've got the details enhancer that we're on now, and we've got the more basic tone compressor. Now the tone compressor is actually available as a free download on the website, so go on there and check it out. It creates really good photorealistic results, but we're not actually going to look at this today. We're going to look at the details enhancer. Although it doesn't look great as it stands at the minute, it can create great results that are much more exciting. Now what makes this special is that it actually uses what are called local area adaptations, which means that it can just adjust very small areas of the image independently from other areas. It's a little bit like shadows and highlights in Photoshop if you've ever used that before. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the settings we got. We've got strength here. Now that actually just affects how strong the details enhancer is going to be. If we take this down to 0, you'll get a very low contrast image. Now that's because the software is trying to include all of the shadow detail, all of the highlight detail in a standard image, and what you get is a very low contrast result. Whereas if we just turn that up a little bit, you'll see we'll get much more contrast as the software is selectively darkening down those highlight areas and selectively brightening those shadow details at once. The thing is, you turn it up too high and you get kind of a funny texture on the image, so what we're going to do is leave that around about 50. Okay, next up we've got the colour saturation, and this just affects the saturation of the image. Turn it up, obviously you get a lot more colour in the shot. Turn it down,
and it goes a bit more black and white. However, this does have the effect of washing out the contrast if you're not too careful. So we'll just leave that on the default setting for around about 50 as well, because it's already looking very punchy compared to our original that you can see behind here. Okay, next up is the light smoothing, and this option is very important to get right. Now the easiest thing to see how it works is just to click on some of the options. Now as you see, the smaller the value I'm using, the more texture there is in the image. Now this is because we're allowing the software to apply its adjustments to much smaller areas, whereas if we use a much larger setting, you can see that only very large areas are being adjusted. And so I'd always recommend using either this setting here or this setting here. The smaller the setting, the better the contrast is going to be, then the more kind of halo artifacts you're getting and all sorts. So I'm going to leave that around there. Down the bottom here, we've got 3 settings. We've got white point, black point, and gamma. Now this is just like using levels. Move the black point to darken down the shadows. Use the white point. That's just going to set the clipping on the highlights, so how bright our highlights are going to be. I'm going to set that right the way down to 0, because at the minute you can see we've got a lot of burnout in the highlights still, and we don't want that. So let's just set that down to 0. And then gamma, that's just your mid-tone. So if we just move that up, the entire image gets brighter. So I'm just going to leave that on the default setting of 1. Okay, so our image is already looking a lot better. As you can see, unlike our original shot, we've actually got a lot more colour coming into these foxgloves now. But we can make it look a bit better yet. We've actually got 4 different sections down here, but the most important ones are micro and shadows and highlights. That's the SH. So if we go to micro first, now what this does is it allows you to set the contrast of the very fine details in the image. So I just bring that up. You can see very subtly. Actually, it will help if I bring up the loop now. If I just click on here, and you can see a much zoomed in close up there of one of the foxgloves. Now if I just bring this down, you can see that the very fine contrast in the shot gets more or less depending on which way we drag it. It's very much a try it and see sort of effect, but I think we could do with a little bit less of anything, maybe -5. Not so much as that. Let's just try -3. Okay, and the other important setting here is the micro smoothing. Now what this does, it allows you to smooth out the image a little bit. You know, we saw the texture change when we changed these light smoothing settings up here. It's very much the same sort of thing, but on a smaller scale. So if we just increase that again with the loop up, and the transition between the shadow areas and the highlight areas just becomes a little bit smoother. Okay, somewhere around about 12 I think would be nice. And I'm just going to close this down now because we don't need the loop open. Now finally we've got the shadows and highlights option, so I'm just going to click on that. And again we've got the same smoothing controls, this time separately between the highlights and the shadows. So I've increased the highlights just to see what it does. Now watch the sky. You can see the sky has become really bright now if I just take that back down again. So it's just bringing back some of the bright highlights from the original shot there. And for shadows, you've got the same options again. If I drag this right the way up, you'll see that it just smudges over the shadow adjustments and makes the whole thing look a little bit funny, a little bit washed out. So we need to use a very small setting here just to make sure we get nice crisp shadows still. And I think that's looking pretty good now. Might just increase the colour saturation just a few % here, just to get a slightly more punchy result. There we go. Well, I'm happy with that. So I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom of this palette here, just off where you can't see it. There's a process button. I'm just going to click on process and then wait for my final image to be rendered. And here it is, all finished. And wow, what a difference that is. If we just compare this now with our original shot, if we hadn't shot at HDR, and you can see that all of that detail's come back in, and it's almost as if we used a polarizer. Some of the glare from down here in the foreground, that's just been reduced as well. Fantastic.
There you go, that wasn't too hard, was it? There's quite a lot of settings in there, and it takes a little bit of experimentation, but follow my advice and you should be able to get pretty good results every time. Right, I'm just going to finish up here, and I'm going to have a well-deserved cup of tea.